No, you can walk away and I'll get your fucking stuff.
Get my stuff.
Yes.
Get my stuff.
Hey, get out.
Get out my.
Oh, what the fuck do you think you're doing?
Get my stuff. No. Get my stuff. Give me my bag.
Call the police. Call the police.
Get off me. Let me go. Get off me.
Somebody's on the phone with the police, right?
Yeah, I'm on the phone with the police.
So guys, I want to do another black fatigue video, and it shows this woman at an airport. And I also want to say too, that disclaimer, like, there are some videos that are AI, I can't tell the difference, so obviously, if it's AI, then that's another issue. But there was this video of this young girl who was at like an airport restaurant, and she was like saying, give me my stuff, really. And what happens is that she's being combative, and she actually hits one of the employees, and one of the employees shoves her to the ground, and people are like saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then what happens is that, she's like trying to grab like something, like I think like a metal plate or like a serving, like maybe it's like a pizza place, and there's like that metal pan you put in the oven. She was grabbing that, and then she was also jumping over the counter and everything's like that. And at the end, she grabbed her coat and runs away, really. So I do want to dissect this a little bit. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that if people are saying whoa and whatever, and this is kind of one of the big issues with black fatigue, is justifying bad behavior. Like, honestly, this girl is hitting, she's swinging people, she slapped somebody in the face. So somebody pushing her to the ground, really, it should be okay, really. Because honestly, then we run to this thing too about, okay, well, if a woman spits on me, I'm supposed to, like, sit there and take it like a man, really. Like, I remember, like, there was this homeless woman when I was in Washington, D.C., and she was jumping in the air and spitting in people's ears right outside the train station. Now, if somebody just punched her in the face and knocked her to the ground, really, we don't know if she has, like, an STD or whatever. We don't know if she bites her lip to get some blood and spit in people's ears, really. But she was doing that to me and a few other people. But if somebody just punched her in the face and knocked her to the ground, really, or get a bunch of police officers to wrestle her and put her in a ambulance to send her to the insane asylum or whatever, really, then I wouldn't feel bad about that. Because we also run to this pattern that, whenever, sometimes when it's black people, sometimes when it's women misbehave, and then people rough them up, or like, whoa, you just crossed the line, really. But like I've said before, there are many times when, like there's many times in the white community, like, there's times when, there's kids who go to school and they say, my dad spanked me, or my parents took away my television, and then they get a phone call from the school and they're like, oh, well, you shouldn't hit your kid. Well, I was disciplining them. Oh, you shouldn't take away the phone. Well, maybe you're being too harsh. Maybe the kid has a mental illness or something like that, really. There are times when that happens with all races. Like, let's be honest about that, where people look for passes. But honestly, too, this should have not been behavior where people are like, whoa, and felt sorry for this person. Because then this encourages this, ghetto ass, hood behavior, which needs to go away, really. The next thing about this video that I did not like was that she got away, really. And this has kind of been a huge issue when it comes to women, especially, when it comes to these black fatigues videos. Usually, if it's a man, he would be wrestled to the ground and arrested. If it's a black woman or any gender of woman, any race of woman, they get out of it, really. And they may say something like, you know what, we don't want to press charges, we don't want to bring it to court, we just want this to go away, really. But what does this do? It encourages this person to continue their behavior. This also says, hey, you know what? This is acceptable. And then the other issue is that this is at a airport. So the problem is that, what would happen if she gets on a plane and repeats the same behavior, really, and then endangers other people, because there is an issue, because obviously you need to stop violent behavior. If somebody's unruly and out of control, what would happen if they're getting on a flight and they cause that other behavior, really, and create a hostile environment. Really, you need to kind of cut at the source, and then also too, on airplanes there are heavier charges, but I don't think in airports in general, like, outside the plane, there you probably would be criminal mischief and other like charges like assault and other things like that. But I do think that with her, having her walk away just says, okay, we accept this behavior, or because you're a woman, we're not going to treat it like a big deal, because usually people show sympathy and laid backness to women, and that's not right, really, because it encourages this type of behavior. The other issue is that some people don't know self-defense, or some people don't know how to apprehend violent females, because she smacks a person in the face, she punches somebody. So sometimes I think that I'm not sure how to say this. I think that sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, but you have to understand security and procedures and all that stuff, really, because the point shouldn't be killing somebody or beating somebody back, really, or being a woman beater, or being anybody beater, or being a woman beater, a man beater, or whatever, really. But I think that, honestly, if I was a judge and they hit her back to stop her, or they just like slammed her to the ground and then they were on top of her in a submission hold or whatever, really, I would say, okay, well, that's reasonable, because she was hitting people, she was jumping over the counter and just trying to do damage and whatever. Because there's also that thing too, that sometimes we show sympathy for people who are violent and do whatever, really. Like we don't also do that. And then also, I think the other thing I want to add in is that we don't know about the women's prison. Like, I know a lot about the men's prison because I've watched Jay Williams and other people, but I'm not sure what happens if they put her in jail. Like, is somebody going to watch this video and be like, hey, I know you from there, I'm going to knock you in the face, really, because you shouldn't be doing that. Because sometimes I think maybe in the women's prison, they need to stand on business. Like, if you see like some young kid acting like a punk or acting ghetto and adding to the stereotypes, if I was a woman in the women's prison and I saw, a young bitch do that, I would whoop her ass and be like, hey, you know what? Why are you doing that? Why are you giving other people issues, really? And maybe that needs to happen, where more women need to stand on business and be like, okay, you got to correct the young kids when you come to the women's prison. Or like, there's an issue of child abuse, when I'm not sure how it works in women's prison. If you're a woman and you assault a child and you go to women's prison, do they beat your ass, really? Because in the men's prison, they do that, really. So maybe that's something that I hope for, but I don't encourage. The other part of this as well, really, that's really bad is, you see like a black security officer and she's like a black woman, really. So this is kind of bad that, she's doing her job. She's trying to do the right thing. She's calling back up. She's doing all that stuff. But when you have like this other woman that's black and just doing all this crazy stuff, really, it really adds to, a lot of people are not going to remember this woman's heroism, this woman just trying to de-escalate the situation, just get her apprehended, but she gets away, really. A lot of times, that happens with a lot of black people, is that when one acts like an idiot, the other ones that are just trying to like even stop the idiot, a lot of people are going to remember the black person acting like the stereotype and everything like that, which is unfortunate, but that does happen a lot. The other problem with this video is that this is like an airport. So, I hate even saying this, but there's a lot of people who come back from trips and vacations, really, and then they see this and they're going to feel really, really angry. Like, I remember like one time I took a trip around America. I went from, New Haven to Chicago to Los Angeles to New Orleans, all the way up, and I visited over like 30 states, and it was a big accomplishment for me. But I remember when I actually went on the train, I was trying to film some footage of the New York skyline, and there was this black woman that was really nasty and rude to me and saying, yeah, he's putting away his phone, and being an asshole, really. So sometimes, when you have moments like this, and then you see like imagine if my brother got married last year. He's black and his wife is white, really. And they see this at an airport after they have their honeymoon. He might think to himself, I'm glad that I didn't marry a black one. Or he may think to himself, or people may think to themselves, oh, pardon my language, look at this nigger ruining everybody's good day. We're coming back from the holidays. We're having a really great time. We feel accomplished by our trips. We feel happy because of our trips. We feel relaxed. We feel cathartic. And now this hood behavior puts everybody in a bad mood, really. You know, and that's kind of like one of the stereotypes about black people, which is that, you know what, they're kind of almost like, you know, they're the party crashers. They ruin everybody's good day. If everybody's, they're the type of person that, you know, if everybody's eating ice cream in a park, they're going to come by and they're going to, like, you know, cause a fight and then disrupt everything. And that's one of the reasons why some people have a hatred towards African Americans, or why there's some people don't like African Americans, because they're like, hey, you know what, we're having a great day. We have smiles on our faces, and you come by and you come in with your attitude and you ruin everything. Like you're a stain ultimately. And I mean, and I hate even saying this, but I've been in many situations in my life where, you know, I grew up in white communities, so I know what it's like to be in classrooms where I'm the only person of color, and then there's another person of color, and that person's being like the rudest, loudest kid, or everybody's having a great day, and then that person misbehaves, and then everybody's like, oh, well, you know, maybe it's because that person's black, you know. So sometimes when you kind of crash the party, that's bad. Or when I did the 48-hour film project, and I've said this in many videos, that one year I spoke to an audience and I said, hey, I struggle with suicidal thoughts and PTSD. And then I had a mental breakdown because I was hurt that my father was running for governor of Connecticut. And then he just spoke online and said, hey, you know what, my son has autism. And he was kind of acting smug. Because that was very hurtful and embarrassing. That was also inaccurate, really. But he threw me under the bus for his political campaign. So when I was on stage and I said that part of my filmmaking was that I struggle with suicidal thoughts, and after PTSD and other bad experiences, I had a mental breakdown where I went on and on about my story. But I remember that I was the only minority there, really. But a lot of people looked at me with disgust, really. They looked at me as, you know, here's the nigger ruining the party, really. You know, everybody's having a great day, everybody's supportive, everybody's happy. But I made myself look like that, you know, as James Baldwin said, that bad nigger that needs to be made an example of, you know, the party crasher. And that's also something that black people have to realize, that sometimes there is that stereotype of African Americans of the party crasher. You know, everybody has a really great day, or you go into a mostly white community, and then there's a black guy messing things up, or shoplifting, or doing other crazy stuff. And then people are like, oh, well, you know, that's the whole race, or we hate you because of what you did, but now we're going to extend it into racism. Like, I remember when I was working at the hospital, there was a lot of white nurses, and what happened is that there was this black person that was homeless, and it was her time to leave the hospital, and she kept, like, hiding in the bathroom, whatever, and then what she did was she punched the nurse in the face, and then a bunch of white police officers just threw her against the wall, really, and handcuffed her. And it ruined everybody's day, and everybody kind of had that, I bet everybody had that vibe of like, okay, well, here's this, you know, black person fucking up everybody's day, really. So when you see videos like this, it makes everybody have that feeling of, oh man, you know, I wish I didn't see any of them in a day, because, you know what, they ruined my day, really, or they're the day ruiners. Or some people like have tension, or their blood pressure rises when they see a black person, because they're like, oh my God, you know, what are they going to do? Are they going to act crazy? Are they going to ruin everything, you know? And unfortunately, you know, there's people who are racist, and part of it is because of BET, Black Experience Trauma. The same way there's white experience trauma. White experience trauma would be if a black person like Rodney King gets beaten up by the cops. That's white experience trauma. And then also white privilege and other things like that. That's white experience trauma. Black experience trauma is when you have bad experience around African Americans. And some people, they'll do that. They'll be like, okay, well, you know what, I got off a plane, and I had a honeymoon, and I'm kissing my wife, and we're all happy, and then we're seeing this, you know, hijinks happen, really. And then they're like, okay, now in the future, they may be like, okay, my blood pressure's rising this time I see a black person, because I don't usually, because there's some people who live in mostly white areas that don't see a lot of black people. They're like, okay, well, every experience I see, or every single time I'm in public or in public areas, oh my God, my blood pressure rises because I remember these experiences and stuff like that, really. So, you know, as I said, every bad behavior you do adds to the stereotypes. But 100%, I will always say this, you know, I've grown up in mostly white communities. I remember, like, when I was in college, there were a lot of white people doing food fights. There was this guy who was drunk, who was white. He punched a RA in the face. I've had professors call me a nigger a bunch of times. I've had people who... I've had professors call me a nigger. I've had professors use the word nigger around me. I've had people in my college call me a nigger as well, who were students. And I remember, like, I had a roommate that was violent, and he would do things like he would just take a can of aerosol, spray my sheets. He would say things like me and my girlfriend had sex on your bed and other things like that. And he would like just be like slamming doors and just trying to fight me and other things like that. Like I remember one time I actually had to carry a weapon with me when I was like his roommate for the last 2 weeks because he was being so violent and just aggressive, really. But there was a time when, like, because of those experiences, I remember, like, my blood pressure rise and rise and rise, and my anger rise, because, like, oh, well, you know, here are these spoiled brat white kids. Because I remember, like I went to school in 2006 to 2010, really. And then 2008, that was kind of when a lot of the entitlement, spoiled brat types of, you know, people came, really. And as I said, that's not all white people. But what I'm trying to say is that I've had bad experiences around white people the way some people have bad experiences around black people, and I've had bad experiences around black people and other like races as well, really. But ultimately, when you behave in a stereotypical way, when you kind of overreact and act violent and other things like that, it may build up racism or racist thoughts or racist responses in people, really, you know. So, and that's not just, you know, black people always having to act right. That's white people and other races always having to act right. You know, as I said, your actions have ripple effects. You know, there's been times when I exploded with anger in public. You know, a lot of my videos are upsetting and enraging, really. So I also have to understand too that I may add to some stereotypes by like what I'm saying and doing, really. Our actions have consequences. But ultimately, too, you know, don't have crash outs in the airport. And it's unfortunate if this was an example of somebody doing wrong and then getting away with it. Because as I said, if this was a black man pinned to the ground, if this was a white man pinned to the ground, if this is a woman, they get away with it. And then also she's young. So there's also that thing, too, maybe if she gets arrested in community service, instead of saying, hey, you know what, you need to get 2 assault charges. I know it's not good. I know people do stupid shit. I know people get angry and emotional, but I'm definitely on the side of when you fuck up, you need to be held accountable, because otherwise we live in a world of you can punch somebody in the face and they have to be like, okay, well, I got to be understanding because, you know, you're young and you're young and maybe you're a woman on your period or whatever, really, like that. Or you're a young man and maybe you have mental health issues or whatever, really. You know, we hold people accountable for their actions, really. And if she got away with it, then fuck the airport, because, you know, she should have been apprehended, pinned to the ground, and charged with assault and other crimes, because that's what you do when people act like this. Doesn't matter the skin color. So very unfortunate video and very piece of shit behavior.